Hey and Horror for All gang, it's Tom here, just coming at you with my review of The First Omen that I saw last night. Obviously this is a film that came out on April the 5th in the US and the UK, and it's directed by Akasha Stevenson, who, I can't quite believe it, but it's her first feature film. I'll come on to her direction shortly. So yeah, join me as I explore what I liked, what I didn't like quite so much, and ultimately why The First Omen is way better than I was expecting it to be, but it's not Horror for All. I just wanted to give it a little bit of backstory on this as well. This channel has only been around for just under 3 weeks now, and about a week and a half ago I put up a short on YouTube where I talked about the gender reveal viral trailer that they put out for The First Omen, which even now is by far my most highly watched video on the channel. It actually accounts for about 3/4 of all the views that my channel's got. So yeah, I decided that I would go see the film, partly as recognition for that, but also partly because I was interested anyway. So yeah, I'll very briefly talk about the plot. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. The plot, very briefly, is that an American novice, so a wannabe nun, goes to Rome to join a nunnery there and gets embroiled in a plot to give birth to the Antichrist. This is obviously a prequel to the Omen film that came out in 1976 about the birth of the Antichrist, Damien, and this is the prequel to that film. So in terms of what I liked about it, firstly, the film looks absolutely stunning. There were several times in the film where I was actually struck at how good the film looks. I think it's very well directed. It's directed with a real sort of air of confidence and sort of a sure hand. And yeah, I was very impressed with the look of the film. The setting of the film, I wasn't expecting to be so interesting going into it. So it's set in Rome in 1971. And this is a relatively sort of drastic time of upheaval in Rome. There are lots of riots and students rioting against the government and the church and authority structures in general. The period piece is very well realized. The music's great, the fashion's great, the vehicles are great. Rome looks like Rome from the 70s. The setting is very, very well done in that respect. The acting is good. Like, I know horror films get a bit of stick in terms of the acting, but the acting in The First Omen, it's not even serviceable. I mean, it is good acting in for the most part. The overall feel of the film, it's not a very jump scary horror film. It's not sort of a sudden jump at you type of horror film. It is one that's a lot more concerned with feelings of fear and tension and dread. And definitely as the film goes on, it really sort of ramps that up. And there are a couple of times where I was expecting a jump scare, and what you instead got was a really kind of well drawn out, sort of intense moment, which I really appreciated. There are a couple of cheap jump scares in there, you know, the kind of jump scares where someone bursts out of the silence with a hand on the shoulder, screaming the character's name just to get their attention. It gets a little bit overused, but overall, this is a film that's quite effective with its scares. The sound, for the most part, is good. The 70s style music I thought was great. Really sort of happy with the disco vibe of the 70s sound. This film's soundtrack overall is good as well. The film does, I think, overly rely on that sort of creepy children's prayer whisper type sound that sometimes, you know, stops just before something scary happens. It's a little overplayed, but that's the only sort of real detriment I could say about the sound. I also enjoyed the themes of the film. And again, I wasn't necessarily expecting this going into the film, but the film has some quite strong themes around, you know, this female novice is coming to the nunnery. She's giving her body to God. She's never really had a chance to explore her own body. She's never felt like her body's her own. That's something that's very strongly carried on throughout the film. There are obviously themes of rejection of authority figures, both in the riots in Rome, but also, you know, Margaret's ultimate sort of rejection of the heads of this nunnery, and other sort of rejections of authority there. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be as interesting in that respect as it was, so I really appreciated it for that. I wasn't so fond of the story overall. They were trying to play for a supposedly quite big twist towards the end. It is pretty predictable. You'll see it coming from a mile off if you do see the film. Overall, the story is a yay or a nay. I think it's entirely a unique thing. The premise of the film is obviously that there is a certain split of the church who are trying to give birth to the Antichrist, to give people something to fear so that they will flock back to the church. For some people, that'll be absolute codswallop. I didn't think so. I thought it was good enough to keep the plot going. So I didn't mind that quite so much, but I imagine that some people might do. The ending was... I say the ending. The ending sequence was very good. The last few shots of the film I found a little confusing, because it finishes with an energy that implies there's going to be a follow-up. But the film also finishes at the start of where the 1976 Omen begins. But it felt like there was going to be a sequel. It just felt like there was going to be sort of another story to tell. And I don't know whether that's, well, go back and watch the old Omen, or if they're going to be remaking that film as the sequel to this. So I'm not so sure about that. And finally, there are a couple of goofy moments in it. Overall, the film's very effective, but there are a few times, especially one towards the end of the film, with a character outside of a church that starts out relatively intense, but the take goes on for way too long, and it just kind of drains the scene of any kind of drama, and it just lost that for me. It took me out of it. In conclusion, if you'd have told me 2 months ago that there was going to be a direct prequel to The Omen coming out, I really wouldn't have been that excited. I've seen The Omen, I've seen The Omen 2. It's not my favourite horror series, but The Omen, I think, has a bit of a soft spot for me. However, the first Omen is a far better film than it should be. It felt like the kind of film that a lot of things were stacked against it. You had a prequel to, you know, an all-right horror series, a first-time director, a relatively, with a couple of exceptions, unknown cast. Nothing in there screamed great film going into it, but it was way better than I thought it should have been, and I very much enjoyed it. The direction, the cast, the overall feel of the film, I thought was very, very good. Interestingly enough, it's not very scary, but it is very gruesome. There are 2 or 3 parts of the film, and they're not, you know, very often, but when they do happen, they are very, very gruesome. And for certain viewers, I think they'd actually be very distressing, especially in the last sort of 15 to 20 minutes of the film. The other cinema goers in the viewing with me were getting pretty distressed at the last sort of 15-20 minutes. And so for that reason, although I did enjoy it, although I thought it was a far better film than it should have been, it's not horror for all. I'd say if you like horror films, if you're a fan of The Omen or the Omen series, if you like horror films with interesting settings and themes and characters, then it is absolutely worth a go. I think you could do a lot worse than watching the first Omen. But yeah, maybe not the film to introduce a viewing partner into the world of horror. So, that is it from me. I hope you've enjoyed that. This is my first proper film review. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a few of these more often as time goes on. Speaking of time going on, this has been about 10 minutes long, so that's enough of all of our time. But hope you all have a great evening. Lovely to share this with you, and yeah, speak to you soon.